Hello and welcome to another All About Stamping video. This is lesson number 3, and today we're going to be talking about Hero Art's clear stamps. Now, I have a lot of Hero Art stamps, so I wanted to break it up into 2 lessons. Most companies will only be 1 lesson, but Hero Art is extra special to me because they're the first ones that I used when I started stamping. So I wanted to kind of break this one apart. So this one's just going to cover the clear stamps that they make and the ones that I really love. So I wanted to show you some of my favorites. We have this butterfly one, the antique engravings. We have this poppy one. It's called Beautiful Blooms, I believe. It's one of my favorites. Then this one is With Sympathy set, which I love having something like this because it's so hard to make sympathy cards a lot of the time, and this makes it a lot easier. So it's good to have a set of sentiments that you can use if you need to. Then they have lots of great sentiment sets that you can use for all occasions. This one is great for pretty much anything. They also have sentiment sets that are good for birthdays, holidays, and things like that. This is Live and Laugh. They also even have some of their older stamp sets. This one's a scalloped border one that I got a couple years back, and I still love it. It's so cute. And they've actually just recently teamed up with Basic Grey, and they make several different types of stamps with Basic Grey. This one is from their Hello Luscious collection, and these are just some of the images from the collection that Basic Grey drew, but Hero Art's made into stamps. So you have the amazing quality of the Made in the USA stamps with the really cool images from Basic Grey. So you can even combine these with Basic Grey paper from the same collection. So that's really cool. And that makes me touch on one thing that really Hero Arts is all about. Made in the USA. They're a very green company, and all their stamps are really, really high quality. So that's really cool, and it really makes me want to support a company like that. So as you can see here, they make a large variety of graphic styles because they have several designers on staff. So really you can find pretty much anything that suits your style or draws you to it. So I'm actually going to make a card using these 3 stamp sets today. I'm going to make a sympathy card because I don't usually make videos about sympathy cards, and they're good ones to make in advance, ahead of when you need them, because sometimes, you know, you're very emotional. So it's good to have some of these on hand, even if it's just, you know, a goldfish that passed away. It's good to have some of these kind of cards on hand. So I'm combining the With Sympathy sentiment with the Skinny Poppies, and then I'm going to use the Dragonfly from this set, and you'll see what I'm going to do with them. So we're going to start out with our card base. This is a standard size A2 card at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and it opens this way. It's made out of Aqua Mist cardstock from Paper Train Ink. And I'm going to start out by making a watermarked background with some Versamark ink, which can be used as embossing, but I'm just going to use it to make this really cool tone-on-tone effect with the Dragonfly. And this will create a nice subtle background that's not just cardstock, but that kind of mimics pattern paper in a really subtle, elegant way. So I'm just dabbing it a couple times on the ink pad and then stamping down on my paper. And I just make sure to press down, directly down, and I kind of just apply pressure all around the block with my fingers. So if I need to move my fingers, that's fine. I just want to make sure the entire stamp gets pressed down. And I'm also making sure to go off the card a little bit. That gives it more of a natural look. And if you don't go off the card, it kind of looks like you tried to stay in the boundaries of the card, and you want it to look kind of fade into the background. So I'm also just stamping some right off the boundary of the card, and that's why I have this piece of type paper behind it, because it helps catch the extra ink. So you can see there's a really subtle effect. You can kind of see it in the light there. And it's just a really pretty way to add a pattern to a card without it being too much. So that is Versamark ink. Then what we're going to do, I want to have my Skinny Poppies go right about here. So I'm going to stamp them in some Memento black ink. And I'm just going to ink up the stamp by pressing it into the stamp pad. Kind of just like a stamping motion. You almost pick up the ink the same way you put it down. And then I'm going to have the stems go off the bottom of the card since this is a very tall stamp. I'm just going to try to get it as centered as I can. And then press down. And once again, notice that I'm applying firm pressure, even using my palm for the middle part. And I'm not moving the stamp because that'll make it smear. You know, and if you mess up, you just flip it over and try again. But this turned out beautifully. I love it. These images are so simple and elegant and so easy to use. Now I'm going to color it. So I'm just going to keep this really, really simple. I'm going to use my lightest purple and just color in the flowers with that. Because this is a just a really simple, elegant card. And notice this marker is alcohol based because it's Copic. And if you have Copics, you know that they have a kind of distinct smell about them. They're not, you know, like Sharpie marker where you can smell them in the entire room. But if you're right next to them, you can definitely smell it. It smells kind of like rubbing alcohol. So this works when you color over Memento ink because Memento ink is water-based. So alcohol ink does not smear the water base in the ink. Okay, now that I've simply colored in my purple, or my flowers with my lightest purple, I'm not even going to do any shading on this, and I'm just going to add a little bit of the green. This is YG17 to the stems, and just a very light touch is all you need to get the color onto the flowers. Okay, now while this dries for a little bit, I mean it's already kind of dry to the touch, but it just needs to kind of soak in and everything. Before I fix my little boo-boos with my colorless blender, I'm just going to set this off to the side for now and we can work on our sentiment. So we have our card base here. What I want to do is have my sentiment on vellum so that you can still see the flower through it and still see the background. So it'll kind of be floating in midair. So I want to stamp my With Sympathy on this vellum. It's on cardstock vellum. You can get this from Paper Tray Ink. And I'm going to use StazOn because this is a slippery surface, so regular dye ink won't work so well. So I'm just going to open up my StazOn pad, and this will stain your stamps. They have special StazOn cleaner, but it's not really good for your stamps to use it. So you can kind of use your own discretion with that. Honestly, I'm okay with kind of just washing it off, and as long as it doesn't stamp anymore, it's fine. It's just a little bit stained. So I'm just inking it up really well by impressing the stamp into the pad. And I'm just going to center it kind of off to the side here. And then stamp down. And you have to be very careful not to wiggle it because it's a slippery surface. It wants to slide around. But press down just like you did before. And then lift straight up. So as you can see, we have a fairly good impression. I find that it's almost impossible to get a perfect impression with StazOn ink on a slippery surface, just because the surface is so slippery. So this is a very good impression. There's no smearing or anything, but it's not quite as clear as if you use regular cardstock that absorbs the ink really well. So just keep that in mind. So now you can see it's going to go right about here. And now that it's been a couple minutes, we can go ahead and correct our little mistakes here with the colorless blender. I just kind of went outside the lines right here, so I'm going to push the color back in with the nib of the pen. Now you don't want to do this if the ink is still wet because it will run everywhere. I've made that mistake more than once, and trust me, it's not fun to deal with. So this really kind of corrects the color, and so if you have little tiny mistakes like this, you can really make them disappear. Now it's not going to get rid of a huge smear, because if you look really closely you can still kind of see where I went outside of the bounds. But it is a really good fix and a really great way to save a colored image if you just mess up a little bit. So the image is looking great now. And now I think I'm just going to go ahead and adhere this to my cardstock. But you know I can't go without inking edges of anything. So I'm going to ink them with my Milled Lavender Distress Ink. Alright, now I'm just going to adhere this with my regular ATG gun. And I want it definitely towards this side because remember my sentiment's going right over here. So I want to be able to read it. That looks very good. And now I can adhere my vellum down. Regular adhesive like my ATG will show through this vellum. So what I'm actually going to do is adhere this with score tape. This is 1/8 inch score tape and you can see it's very, very thin. And I'm just going to apply it to the top and the bottom, and then I'll just cover the score tape with a little bit of ribbon when I get done. So what's really cool about score tape is it tears really easily, but it's really strong adhesive. So I just tore off a little piece and now I can line it up all the way across. It just has to be close to the border. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you can even go off the side a little bit, especially since if you remember from when we if you look at the size of this vellum, it's a lot wider than it needs to be. So we'll be trimming some off. So I can just run my fingers over it to make sure that the adhesive is actually stuck to the card. And before I peel it off, I'm just going to trim off these ends so I don't have excess adhesive kind of just waving out in thin air. And now I can peel them off. And what's really great about this, if you've ever used red line tape, you know that it static clings to everything. And this doesn't do that, so that is definitely a welcome difference. So I'm just going to place it over, and once this is down, it is stuck, so you have to be very careful. Line it up, and then press down. And we'll just trim off our edges. And there we have it. We could probably even just leave it like this. You can barely tell that the adhesive's there. But I just want to add a little bit of ribbon. Since I know this ribbon is 1/4 inch wide, I'm just going to use score tape again. So I'm just going to put the score tape where I want it to go, and as long as it's straight and covering up the original seam of the ribbon, you're good to go. So I'm just going to put my score tape down right now. Alright, and so I've applied my score tape. I can just take it off now. I've trimmed off this edge, but kind of left a tail on the back so it can wrap around. And I'm going to make sure it doesn't stick to my paper because it's not going to come off. So I'll put it on my craft mat and trim off a piece of ribbon that's about, 5 inches long. And then simply stretch the ribbon over the tape, and then when you're ready, press down. And then just wrap it around the back. Alright, so now that I have my ribbon adhered, and I just cut off the edges, if you are worried about the edges fraying, you can always put glossy accents on them or some fray check, but I'm just going to leave them for now. And I'm just going to I'm going to round the corners first using my 1/2 inch corner chomper. And I love this thing because I can do it at the end of the card even if there's a million layers on here because it's open on the top. And it cuts through just about everything. And then just a little bit of inking around the edges. And there we have it. Here's our finished card using all Hero Art stamps and 3 different sets at that. So thank you very much for watching this 3rd video in my series. I hope you stay tuned for the next few videos. Here's a picture of the finished card. And here's a picture of the close-up. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you again next time.